And it aired at a time when many young children were likely watching. Please sign our petition urging Nickelodeon to never again air the VMAs. Visit 1millionmoms.com and help protect our children. Thank you.
Welcome to Today's Issues. Join us for the next hour as we offer a Christian response to the issues of the day. Here's your host, Ed Vitagliano.
And welcome to Today's Issues. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman today. And I am joined in studio, folks, get this, by both Chris Woodward and Steve Paisley-Jordahl at the same time. Good morning, gentlemen.
What a day, what a day, what a day.
Yeah. Okay, you're that's not a good start, Chris. Okay, now your microphone should be plugged in.
This is proof that I don't turn into Steve during the break.
That's right.
I don't say Shazam and then turn into a much larger man.
Yeah, I resemble that remark.
Well, he was saying much larger in the generic sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
For those not aware, Shazam is the little kid that turns into like a giant superhero.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Got that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the superhero reference. I'll take that.
That's right. No cape, but
Not all heroes need capes, Ed.
that's true. And from the first Incredibles movie, if you remember that, capes were often the spell disaster.
They were the demise of many heroes.
Yes, for many heroes. That was pretty funny. All right, so I'm not sure I can remember many days when bigger news was about to. We were about to discuss bigger news from last night. This is huge. This is something that's never happened before. Now, Chris, you and Steve are going to be tossing stories into the mix today.
Yes.
But we're going to start with you, Chris.
Yes, this is an historic moment in these United States of America, and I say that because in a story you can find on our website, afn.net, there was a vote yesterday that made Kevin McCarthy the first speaker in history to be removed from office. Now, let's go back several months. There were more than a dozen votes to try to get Speaker Kevin McCarthy to become Speaker. Many conservatives, people like Matt Gaetz, were concerned that he was not the right guy for the House. But finally, after 12 to 15 some odd attempts, they allowed Speaker Kevin McCarthy to become Speaker. And what happened this week is Matt Gaetz was upset that Kevin McCarthy worked with Democrats to get a continuing resolution in place to continue to fund the government for the next 6 weeks or so. And Matt Gaetz was not happy about that, so he raised an issue that allowed for a vote yesterday, which ended with Kevin McCarthy becoming again the first speaker in U.S. history to be removed from office. One of the clips that Steve threw on a newscast for us last night was this one of Matt Gaetz talking to reporters about McCarthy, saying he hopes that he takes a hint now. Let's begin here. Clip 1.
I think Kevin McCarthy should take a hint. After 15 ballots to become Speaker, after 8 months of a failed speakership, and after removal in this historic manner, I think we should move on and find somebody else. What's paralyzed the House of Representatives has been the failure of Speaker McCarthy. What paralyzed the House of Representatives was not taking up appropriations bills. We left for a 6-week vacation while the appropriations process hung in the balance. And because I forced these people to take a few votes, you think I'm paralyzing the House of Representatives?
You're saying that nobody trusts Kevin McCarthy, but you're talking about, including yourself, about 7 Republicans compared to about 200 and about, some odd Republicans who actually do trust him. So can you kind of explain that here?
Well, as it turns out, getting 200 Republicans to trust you isn't enough to stay Speaker.
Now, if you are...
Wow.
That's just the start, folks. Stick around, because we have plenty of things to talk about here. If you're wondering who the 8 House Republicans were that joined Democrats yesterday in voting to oust Speaker McCarthy, they were Matt Gaetz, of course, of Florida, along with Andy Biggs of Arizona, Ken Buck of Colorado, Tim Burkett of Tennessee, Eli Crane of Arizona, Bob Good of Virginia, Nancy Mace of South Carolina, and Matt Rosendale of Montana. A lot of people are upset about this. Many people are behind what Gaetz and others did, but one person that's upset with what Gaetz and company did is former House Speaker Newt Gingrich. He was on Fox and Friends today talking about this very issue. Clip 5.
96% of the Republicans voted for McCarthy. 4% voted against him. From my position as a longtime Republican activist, they're traitors. All 8 of them should, in fact, be primaried. They should all be driven out of public life. What they did was to go to the other team to cause total chaos. We ought to be focusing on Biden. We ought to be focusing on the economy. We ought to be focusing on the border. Instead, you're going to get a week or 10 days of the media focusing on Republican disarray. It's an astonishingly destructive behavior by a handful of egocentric people who think they're superior to 96% of the conference.
All right, Steve. Now we've got more folks on this issue. Steve, this is incredibly controversial. There is a lot of back and forth going on amongst Republicans, and we can discuss some of these issues, including what the former Speaker Newt Gingrich had to say. He said yesterday, I think in an op-ed, that Matt Gaetz should be bounced from the Republican Party. He can't be removed from office by the Republicans, but he can be declared persona non grata, you're no longer a Republican. But now let me ask you this. My understanding is that part of the deal that Kevin McCarthy agreed to after this, whatever, I think it was 15 rounds of votes, was that a simple vote could be called by any single member of the House Republicans to remove the speaker. Is that true?
It was one of many. The other concession that they got was that they were, and this relates, folks, hang in with me, that they were going to allow or introduce spending bills one at a time instead of passing this omnibus stuff. An omnibus bill, and I'm going to sneeze here.
Okay. Well, and I've said for years that should be the way the House
It should
operates.
be, but they got a promise from McCarthy, and what did he do just within the last week? He shepherded through an omnibus bill. Now, McCarthy is saying, listen, we got it. We can't shut down the government. That's going to be worse for Republicans, so we're going to do this. We're still working out how to do that. But let me just climb into Matt Gaetz's head. I'm not saying that I agree with him necessarily. This is a hit or miss. He's either going to be the biggest hero ever, or he's going to be the biggest goat in the world. Not greatest of all time, and the bad goat.
Right.
But this
the way
is,
it used to be used.
This is climbing inside his head from my perspective. Everybody goes to Washington, they campaign saying, I'm going to shake things up, I'm going to be different, and especially in the age of Trump and populism, we're going to do these things and we're going to hold our word, and everybody gets to Washington and they kind of get eaten up by the swamp. And I think Gaetz is saying no more. Says we've promised things to our voters, McCarthy promised things to us, and we are going to hold him to it. Now, politics, I think by definition, the word politics in whatever language is compromise. So that might not be the best way to go, but I think that's where his mind is.
Well, and now it is going to be a little bit chaotic here, and Chris will get your take on what's probably coming up and whatever other sound you have, because there are so many facets to this. All right, and I mean, including, which we can get to, the suggestion that maybe former President Trump will be selected as the next Speaker of the House. But Chris, let me just get your take on what you're hearing in terms of what Steve said, because if that is, and that's part of what Matt Gaetz has been saying, is his reason, or among his, one of the reasons for doing what he has done. Listen, I am a firm believer that if Republicans have control of the House, and it may be by a narrow margin, but they are still in charge, they do need to make certain decisions about the process. And if Speaker McCarthy was not willing to do that, and by process, I mean none of these huge spending bills. We all know how this omnibus bill is fattened up, okay, by everyone tossing in their pork. But I've always said, and I'm certainly not alone, that if you have a transportation bill, it's a transportation bill. You don't stuff funding for Ukraine in there or money for the border. It's a transportation bill. It's highways and bridges. That's it. You don't stuff pork, and by pork I mean extra money for your home district. You don't stuff it with pork. And the only way that this is continuing to happen is that you have these huge 2,500-page omnibus bills, maybe larger than that now. Nobody reads it. The American people can't digest it. We all, we have jobs. That's what we send people to Washington, D.C. for. So what are you hearing in terms of that particular argument that Matt Gaetz has been making?
Yeah, some people seem to be kind of like Steve was saying to his point. Gaetz better know what he's doing, because it's very possible in the next few days we're going to have a vote and there's going to be a significant push to have a Democrat be the Speaker of the House, even though Republicans have a very slim majority. Hakeem Jeffries has already been thrown out there as a name.
He's the House Minority Speaker.
House Minority Leader. And if you go back to January, when they were going through all these 11 billion votes to try to determine who would be the House Speaker, Hakeem Jeffries was one of the people out there that was getting a lot of votes to become the House Speaker. Based on how the House is structured and all the language that goes into the rules and regulations and whatnot, it is very possible that you could have a Democrat be the head of the House, even though Republicans have more seats there, just as Donald Trump could become the House Speaker or some other person who's not even a member of the House of Representatives, based on the language on how the House is structured.
Okay, now let me just stop you right there and just make clear to our listeners. That is that's what I've been reading. Is that what you two have been hearing in terms of the requirements for House Speaker? Steve, you don't have to be a member of the actual House to be the Speaker. Is that what you?
That is correct. And by the way, as just kind of an odd addendum to that, you don't have to be a judge to be on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, that's true.
But you do not have to be a member of the House to be Speaker of the House, and that's why they are floating. In fact, they have promised to nominate Donald Trump.
Who's promised that?
Several
Greg
of the
Steube
Republicans.
is one example of somebody out there that has thrown Trump's name out. If you go back to January, Gaetz voted for Trump several times during the whole back and forth over McCarthy.
Now, we can talk about that right now, but let's hold off on that.
Okay.
I have an opinion on that.
Okay.
Go ahead and finish what you were going to say in terms of who can be Speaker. Because
Anybody,
no regulations.
Anybody can. Now, in order for Hakeem Jeffries, Hakeem Jeffries is the heir apparent to Nancy Pelosi.
Right.
In order for him to become Speaker, he would have to have some Republican votes. Now, normally you'd say that's never going to happen. I don't know what to call right now the Republican Party in the House.
Right.
I just don't know.
So let me ask you this. They do, either of you can answer this. I'm trying to remember back when McCarthy was finally voted in as Speaker. But they only vote on one candidate at a time, right? There's not like three
Correct.
that are running against each other where you could split Republican votes. They just vote for one. So if it's someone nominates, throws Donald Trump's hat into the ring, or Hakeem Jeffries, everyone votes on that, right?
Well, back in January, when they were going around the room, different people were standing up and saying different names. So I don't know it's going to come down to an issue of X versus Y, because Gaetz would stand up and say, Donald J. Trump, and then, people would boo, and somebody would get up and vote for Kevin McCarthy. So you do get to have some sort of individualized choice in determining who the Speaker would be.
But you still need a majority of votes in the House, not a plurality. So if Hakeem Jeffries got 40% and Trump and whoever split the other 60%, 30-30, you would still need 50 plus 1 to be House Speaker. So.
All right. Okay, and my understanding is that Kevin McCarthy, when asked, did he have a reply as to whether he would run?
Oh, he's not. Yeah, he's already said, and I'll share this link in a moment, he's already said he's not going to do it again. So
this process has left a bad taste in his mouth.
Yes.
And personally, let me just address this. It's my opinion. You guys can toss in, say whatever you want. I think it would be a clown show. All right, it's already this whole
it's already a
dust
circus.
up. It's already a circus. Okay.
Some would say a dumpster fire, but well.
And to Newt Gingrich's point, it is going to make the Republicans look bad. Okay, when people really do care about getting other things done. However, I also understand the other side of this, that now's the time to change the way Republicans do business in the South, in the House, not the South, in the House. But it is, if it's a circus now, it's a clown show. If there's a serious effort to push Donald Trump as Speaker of the House, okay, I'm not saying he wouldn't be a good speaker or anything like that, but the man is running for president while simultaneously fending off numerous legal attacks. And if Republicans want the voting public to think they're incompetent, then, because this seems gimmicky to me. It seems like some kind of a gimmick why stop at Donald Trump? Why not Brad Pitt? You know what I'm saying? Obviously,
he's a Democrat.
Yes. Okay. That's a good point. But what do you guys? What's your opinion on?
Yeah,
having
I don't
Donald
see
Trump's name thrown in there.
Trump, said, hey, he would serve Vivast. We do have that audio, and to prove I'm not making it up, let's play it, and then I'll give you my take. Let's do clip 4 here of Donald Trump.
A lot of people have been calling me about Speaker. All I can say is we'll do whatever's best for the country and for the Republican Party. We have some great people. We have some great people. Would you take the job? A lot of people have asked me about it. I'm focused. We're leading. I don't know you. I'm sure you don't read too much in the papers, but we're leading by like 50 points for president. My focus is totally on that. If I can help them during the process, I would do it. But we have some great people in the Republican Party that could do a great job as Speaker.
Say that now. That's a good answer from the.
It's kind of a both.
If you didn't hear that clearly, he said, "If I can help them in the meantime while I'm running for president, I will."
Yeah.
And that's my answer to your question. Donald Trump is not going to settle for House Speaker. Donald Trump wants to be president again. He likes what he did. He wants to. I've heard him speak. We've all heard the rallies and we've played the clips in the show. I've been in the same room with him during some of his speeches. So he wants to be president again. And I think a lot of people out there, if you believe the polls, want him to be president again, too. I don't think he's going to settle for Speaker and let somebody he refers to as Ron DeSanctimonious become the leader.
Right.
Well, I will say he might not be able to pass up the chance to put Speaker of the House on his resume for a year.
Right.
While he's running?
While he's running.
Well, I mean, listen, I understand. I thought that was a good answer. I had not heard the audio. I had just read statements. Obviously, he's being caught, I think, after coming out of the courtroom.
Before going in this morning.
Or before going in, okay. So if you are, and President Trump is the leader of the Republican Party at this point, he's the standard bearer, you do have to take a team-first mentality when it comes to something like the Speaker of the House. I just hope that nobody nominates him. Listen, he threw his support behind McCarthy.
He did.
But before the vote.
He said McCarthy has said nice things about me. He had very nice remarks about Kevin McCarthy.
So he obviously wants the process not to be complicated by I don't want to be disrespectful to Matt Gaetz or whoever would toss the name of Donald Trump into the ring. But to me, that is gimmicky. And they need to focus on, as the former president said, one of the people they already have in the House who is familiar with the rules and the process of the House of Representatives. I wouldn't take the job. What do I know about it? All right. So they need somebody who's been doing that.
If Donald Trump were to become the House Speaker, he might become the first president and House Speaker to be impeached. So that would be another check mark for his resume. Talking about the process. I'm going to share the link to Jenna's podcast here in a moment. But Jenna had Representative Bob Good of Virginia on today.
Jenna Ellis.
Yes. This was on AFR Talk. Bob Good was one of the House Republicans who voted yesterday to oust Kevin McCarthy. And Jenna had Representative Good take a moment to describe the process going forward now that they have ousted McCarthy in terms of how they, House Republicans, are going to try to pick their next House Speaker. Clip 7.
We now have an opportunity to come together and select a David instead of a Saul, and to prayerfully select whom the Lord would raise up to be the best person to be the Speaker. We will be vetting candidates and meeting with candidates, and then have a candidate forum on Tuesday night. We'll actually have a competition and a contest for someone to earn the support of the majority of the conference, Republican conference, instead of it being a coronation of the next person in line, who's kind of played the system and who's the greatest reflection of the swamp system, the greatest swamp creature, if you will. This will be very different come Tuesday evening when we have that candidate forum.
Is it going to be push-ups or is it going to be a hot dog eating competition?
American Ninja style gauntlet,
Steve, that was brutal. What he said, calling Kevin McCarthy Saul,
right?
And folks, and now we're going to pick a David. Folks, for those of you who have forgotten your Old Testament, Saul was.
Yeah, we're not talking about the apostle.
We're talking to you, Andy Stanley.
Yes. Who have forgotten the Old Testament. Hey, that was a good line. But Saul, the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and he was rejected as king. I guess I see the point, but politics can be brutal. That was a pretty brutal.
I have in front of me the actual process from the Congressional Research Service. This is what is going to happen. No, we don't know who, but this is how it goes. In current practice, each House party caucus selects prior to the floor vote a candidate whose name is placed in nomination. Typically, the election commences from a member of each party caucus placing the nomination of the party's candidate on the floor. Other names may also be placed on the floor. The election has, since 1839, has been a roll call vote. Votes are cast by voice. Members are not required to vote for one of the candidates nominated by each of the major parties. They may vote for any individual. Although U.S. Constitution does not require the Speaker to be a member of the House, all speakers so far have been. So
each party puts forth someone?
Each party puts forth someone, but they can vote for anyone. Okay. They don't have to vote for one of those two. It's not a binary choice.
All right. Well, my opinion is if you don't want public opinion to just tank, if you're a Republican, this needs to be done quickly. This doesn't need to be dragged out for a month. Mm-hmm. This needs to be, and I think that Matt Gaetz has said, I've heard some clips, I think it was Matt Gaetz who said this, that this next Tuesday, is that what we're looking at in terms of this?
We're going to have a contest.
Have a hot dog eting
potato sack race down Pennsylvania Avenue.
That's pretty funny. So anything else on this story that you've got, Chris?
How much time do we have left, Brent? Okay, let's do this because it was an interesting exchange, and this kind of goes it shows the divide between members of the media and some of the House Republicans. For example, Tim Burkett here, one of the House Republicans that voted to ouster McCarthy yesterday, he and Brian Kilmeade had an interesting exchange today. Clip 6.
The point is that we're $33 trillion in debt. This speaker was woefully lacking in leadership skills. He always placed the blame somewhere else. America is going to be better off with new leadership, and that's the bottom line.
And who is it?
Possibly it could be Steve Scalise. It could be Elise Stefanik. It could be Roger Williams out of Texas. It could be Mark Green out of Tennessee.
So they all supported Kevin McCarthy, including the most conservative guy I know, Jim Jordan. Why are you smarter than Jim Jordan and the 210 plus Republicans? Why are you smarter?
I represent my district, brother. And why are you smarter than me? You're condemning me because I stand up on my own, and that's
I'm not
what
condemning
I do.
you. I'm questioning you. You don't like being questioned?
You're just the line of questioning is very negative, and you know that, and I know that.
Ouch.
There's no question which side Brian Kilmeade was on. A lot of folks upset with what happened, embarrassed at what happened, but who's the congressman?
Tim Burkett of Tennessee.
He starts off with the $33 trillion in debt, and I got to tell you, that sticks in the craw of a lot of fiscal conservatives because nothing ever seems to be done. And Republicans have the House, and they want something done. Anyway, folks, Dr. Alex McFarland is right around the bend. He's waiting in the wings, and any other metaphors I can bring you.
It's my turn.
Here is your host for My Turn, Don Wildman.
Perhaps you have heard it, perhaps not. But even if you have heard it, it's worth repeating. The legend of the three trees. It goes like this. Once there were 3 trees in the forest near Jerusalem. They were baby trees, and they were discussing what they wanted to be when they grew up. One tree said that his desire when he grew up was to be made into a baby's cradle. The second tree expressed its desire. When I grow up, I want to be made into a mighty sailing vessel and explore the high seas. And then the third tree added that it wanted to be just what it was. I want to remain a tree and stay on the top of this hill and point people to God and His beauty and love. Well, the years came and went, and before long the trees were all grown up. The tree which wanted to be a cradle for a baby was cut down and made into a feeding trough. The second tree was cut down and made into a small fishing boat, which was used on the Sea of Galilee. And the third tree was cut down and made into a cross for use in a crucifixion. None of the 3 trees got what they wanted, it seemed. The trees learned a lesson which many grown-up humans often learn, and that is that the dreams we dream as children often don't come true in adulthood. How many of us have gotten what we wanted since we've grown up? Many a small girl has dreamed dreams of a Prince Charming rescuing her and her marrying Prince Charming and living happily ever after. And many a small boy has dreamed of becoming an important person as an adult and winning the praise of his fellow man. But let me finish the legend of the 3 trees. The one which was made into a feeding trough was used as a cradle for the baby Jesus. And the one which was made into a small fishing boat was used by the man Jesus to preach from. And the one which wanted to stand on the top of a hill and point people to God was used to crucify Jesus on. So it seems that each of the 3 trees received its wish. The only thing is that their wishes weren't fulfilled as they thought they would be. And how true to life this is. The little girl who never had her Prince Charming rescue her did fall in love with a fine young man who loved her devotedly throughout life. And the little boy who dreamed of becoming important wasn't known around the world, but to his wife and children, he was one of the most important people in all the world. Perhaps God is kinder to us than we often realize. Perhaps our childhood dreams come true more often than we think they do. We may not be able to get everything we want exactly like we want it in life, but this I believe. If we will set our sight on some high and noble goal and continue to pursue it throughout our life, there's a good chance we will reach it. For as the poet William Cooper once wrote, God moves in mysterious ways, His wonders to perform. So continue to pursue your high and noble dream. Who knows, it could come to you as it came to the 3 trees, by slipping in the back door.
This has been My Turn with Don Wildman, a production of the American Family Association.
Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. According to His great mercy, He has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. 1 Peter 1:3.
American Family Radio. This is today's issues. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of today's issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of today's issues.
And welcome back. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman today. I am joined in studio by both Chris Woodward and Steve Jordahl. And Dr. Alex McFarland will be joining us in just a couple of minutes. But first, Chris, let me get you to, we're going to run a commercial here.
Yes.
Okay, because you did mention a couple of stories that are online at American Family News. That's afn.net.
Mm-hmm.
Some of our listeners to AFR programming may not know what afn.net is. Why don't you tell them what's there, what the purpose of it is, and how folks can get linked up with that kind of news source?
Yes. We are blessed here to have a news division that operates in two ways. We are a radio and print news division here at American Family Radio. Our website is afn.net, and that stands for American Family News. What you hear at the top of every hour on AFR, and about 100 or so non-AFR stations now, is the radio side of things. Many of those stories wind up on our website, again, afn.net. But we also have a ton of content that doesn't always make it on the radio. We have AP headlines. We've got videos. There's usually a column there that's very interesting. We even have political cartoons. So it's all there on afn.net. Steve Jordahl has many stories there, as does Charlie Butts, Chad Groening, all the people you hear on the radio, myself included. We're all there on afn.net, and I was paid for this commercial advertisement.
By AP, you mean Associated Press.
Yes.
That is a secular news source, but
we edit it.
But it is edited.
Fred is the filter.
Yes, because
Filter Fred.
They do put a spin on their quote unquote journalistic stories.
We do.
It is an excellent news service.
Thank you.
Because they do have. Well, I wasn't talking about AFN just yet. That's excellent as well.
Thank you.
I'm just encouraging people about Associated Press. They have people all over the world covering the news that is going on both here and abroad. We do get some good, excellent videos about stories. What's great about AFN is not only do we produce our own content, which it consists of a lot of interviews with newsmakers and those who have insight on issues of politics or foreign policy or military happenings around the world. But we also have it from a Christian perspective.
Yes, and if you want to, at the top of afn.net, if you look in the right side of the top corner there, you'll see a button that says subscribe. Click that, give us your name and email address, and once a day, for free, you will get an email from us with about 5 or 6 links, stories that you need to know to keep you and yours informed.
And if they click one of those links, they will be taken to that particular story at AFN, but it is also very easy to go to the homepage of AFN and see all the other stuff that's there.
Yes, and my favorite phrase to say is there is no paywall.
There is, yes.
So we do not charge you to read our stuff.
Nothing's more frustrating than to get a link to
the people that do that, bless your heart.
Yes, that's and in Southern circles, that's usually an insult.
Bless your heart.
Bless your heart, Washington Post. All right, we want to welcome to the program Dr. Alex McFarland. Most listeners to American Family Radio know that name. He is co-host of Exploring the Word, heard weekdays at 3 p.m. Central Time on American Family Radio. But we also are blessed to have him on with us on today's issues as often as we can get Alex, because he's often traveling. Alex, welcome back, sir.
Well, thank you, guys. Thank you for your patience. I just got through speaking to a couple of hundred high school students, and so it's a productive day already.
Well, where did that occur? Are you at home? Are you on the road, or what?
I'm on the road in Dillon, South Carolina. I've got the privilege this week of speaking at First Baptist Church in Dillon, South Carolina. Dr. Jamie Arnett, wonderful pastor, and we're having a great week of preaching and revival. And anyway, I'm on the road in South Carolina, and let me just say, all over this region, we have AFR listeners, and I feel very privileged. People have driven we had some people Sunday that had driven like 5 hours to come to First Baptist Dillon to hear me speak, and so it's always a privilege. I mean, really, I'm very humbled. The AFR family, they are so faithful and so enthusiastic and very supportive. As Bert Harper and I travel over the country, they come and hear us, and I just want to say it means the world to us.
They drove 5 hours? I'm going to say
I know, it was a
that's
letdown,
impressive.
I'm sure.
No, I don't think so. That's very impressive for someone to take that much time out of their week to make that trip. Well, that's great news, Alex. I am sure those high school students were wowed. I'm wowed every time I hear Alex speak in an official capacity at a conference or something. He is just so good. Folks, if you ever find out that Dr. Alex McFarland is going to be anywhere near you, take a trip. It will certainly be worth worthwhile and spiritually profitable. Right. All right, Steve.
Yes, sir.
You found this, and really it was about 9:30, just over an hour ago. You found this op-ed in the Washington Post, and we wanted to pitch this to Alex. So why don't you set this up?
All right. Alex has read this as well. So there was an op-ed in the Washington Post by an author named Kate Cohen. She is a columnist for the Washington Post, and it was adapted from her new book called We of Little Faith, Why I Stopped Pretending to Believe and Maybe You Should Too. Her book, her title, not mine.
Right.
Anyway, what she says here, the title of the column is America Doesn't Need More God. It Needs More Atheists. And after she expounds on why she is proud to be an atheist, she says those are all personal rewards, but there are political rewards as well. She says, my children know how to distinguish fact from fiction, which is harder for children raised religious. My children, don't assume conventional wisdom is true, and they do expect arguments to be based on evidence, which means they have the skills to be engaged, informed, and savvy citizens. She says, peel back the layers of discrimination against LGBTQ people, you'll find religion. Peel back layers of control over women's bodies, from dress code to Roe v. Wade, you find religion. So basically what she's saying is religion Christianity specifically, makes for bad citizens, and a better citizen would be an atheist. Alex, why would a Christian be how can a Christian be a good citizen, and why would they be better, or is she right?
Well, it's very unfortunate, an article like this, because for centuries, Christianity was seen as a public good. Even those who weren't necessarily Christians or didn't necessarily believe in God, people understood that the presence of religious conviction, and specifically Christianity, that was a public good. But we're living in a time, the first time in American history, that Christianity is seen as a net negative, and that's very unfortunate. Now, first of all, let me say Christians do make better citizens, and I'll tell you, somebody who wrote about that was the twice Pulitzer-nominated sociologist Rodney Stark, who talked about the benefit of, quote, the iron Protestant work ethic. But Christians make better citizens, for a lot of reasons, some of which Christians will relate to, but I think all of which just anybody could understand. Christians make better citizens, for one thing, because we're filled with the Holy Spirit. And the Bible says the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, self-control. Against such there is no law, meaning that the fruits in the life of a Christian, you don't have to pass laws against kindness, morals, gentleness, selflessness, generosity. What's operative, the outflow of the life of a Christian, you don't have to regulate that with laws. Now, the outflow of the life of people who aren't Christians, greed, selfishness, murder, lies, slander, violence, domestic abuse, you have to pass laws against that. So to Ms. Cohen, who's arguing of the benefits of an atheistic society, look, atheism and no moral restraint, what does that give you? Flash mobs, smash and grab, homelessness, fentanyl deaths, just basically the morass of anarchy that we find our country in. But let me say a couple of more things. Christians make better citizens because we live for something outside of ourselves. We're not just indulgent narcissists. We realize there's an objective moral code. We realize that we're accountable to God, and we realize there is truth to not only know, but live for. Let me say one last thing, guys. From the early 20s to 1949, there was a Democrat, a Jewish House of Representatives member, Saul Bloom. Saul Bloom served 14 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives. Now, in 1937, he wrote a book called The Story of the U.S. Constitution, which the late Antonin Scalia called the classic in constitutional studies. And Representative Jewish, not a Christian, as far as we know, from New York State, Saul Bloom, he said, quote, that an atheist could never be president because the oath of office includes swearing an oath of allegiance to a higher power. So not only the president, but citizens themselves, he argued, should believe in God, because belief in God implies accountability to God and then belief in an objective moral standard. So guys, we in our churches, we in our homes, and thank the Lord for American Family Radio, we need to call our nation to God, not away from him, because look, the 3, 4, 5 decades we've been drifting away from God. Look where it's left us, in an America that we barely recognize, an America that is unsafe, and an America that is unraveling in real time. And may God grant that Ms. Cohen's article goes nowhere but into the trash can.
Alex, very well said, by the way. I always find that articles like this, and it's based on a book that she's written, and I'm sure she's hoping that people will pick up a copy of it. Mm-hmm. But I always find these articles not only self-righteous, but disingenuous, because her point was that if you dig down underneath anti-LGBTQ sentiment, you will find religion. In other words, those Christians are always concerning themselves with who, to put it in their kind of terms, who can sleep with whom. Okay, they're so focused on sexual morality. That's just one example. This applies to any of the things that she'll probably say in her book. But if you were to ask Ms. Cohen, now I did try to look up here just as you were speaking to find out if she was married. I couldn't in such a short amount of time. But let's assume she's married. And let's assume that, she's heterosexual and married to a man. If you were to ask her, because she does have children, that's what's part of her argument, do you have any limitations on whom your husband can have sexual relations with? I'm guessing she's probably going to say yes. He's supposed to be monogamous. If you were to ask whether a 25-year-old, if she has a problem with a 25-year-old teacher having relations with a 15-year-old girl, let's just forget about it being a teacher. Would she mind if a 25-year-old man had relations with her 15-year-old daughter? I'm guessing she would say yes, absolutely.
She would mind.
She would mind. Yeah. So it's not just Christians who have limitations. We happen to put those limitations perhaps in a different spot. But I'm guessing even atheists, by and large, have ideas about where those lines should go. So to me, it's disingenuous. They're hardly ever honest when it comes to these discussions. She's not going to get pushback in the Washington Post, which is absolutely a secular promotion tool for the secular left. So isn't this a disingenuous argument as you debate atheists, and you do on college campuses? Isn't this a blind spot for a lot of them?
Well, it really is, because atheists can wax eloquent about their assumption there is no God and there is no objective moral code, and then they will lay out what their moral boundaries are that they want you to recognize.
Right.
I was in New York City a couple of years ago with John Stossel, and he was talking about, he didn't believe in God, and he said people are basically good. And he remarked that he had 2 young daughters. I think one was like 7 or 8, and one was about 11 or 12. And it dawned on me, and I asked him, I said, hey, on New Year's Eve, do you let your daughters go to Times Square alone? And he said, of course not. I said, why not? And he said, well, because they're thugs and rapists and human traffickers, and I have 2 daughters, and I have a responsibility to protect them. And I said, yeah, but you've just told me that people are basically good, that people aren't sinners, people are basically good. But I said, you don't let your young daughters go to Times Square on New Year's Eve, because I think deep down you and I both know that people aren't basically good. People can be capable of very horrible things, and you're right to protect your daughters, but that just shows that back of all the rhetoric, you have to live as if there are moral absolutes. You have to live as if you do have responsibilities as a parent, and you have to live mindful of the fact that humans are sinners. But let me just say this. When people say, okay, you guys are homophobic, transphobic, you've got all of these mores that are just based in your religious bias. There are two things at play here. For one, they're being dismissive that human gender is, quote, merely some religious construct, which it isn't. We're talking about, the left always says follow the science. It's really those that are of the Judeo-Christian worldview that really our beliefs measure up with the empirical reality all around us. There are males and females. The other thing is the idea that marriage is between a man and a woman, the idea that it's wrong to not have legal protection for the unborn, and it's wrong to murder human beings for convenience. The idea that a male can't turn into a female. These are not religious precepts. This is undeniable biology and morality. And our whole Constitution, I'll say this, I know we're almost out of time, but listen to this, folks. Our Constitution presupposes objective morality. And what I say to atheists is, if you want what we've had for 2.5 centuries, if you want liberty, stability, prosperity, you can have that whether or not you're a Christian. But if you're a non-Christian, and that's your prerogative, you need to tolerate what gave us in world history, the history of the world. There's never been a country with so much safety, so much prosperity, so much opportunity, so many people that become affluent. And dear atheist, be an atheist. Live, die, go to hell. That's your choice. But we cannot allow you to dismantle the foundation that allows you to safely, prosperously walk around as a non-believer. And if you want what we've got, a free, safe, prosperous America, you have to tolerate what gave it to us and what brought us to the table of opulence and wealth. It was, as Rodney Stark, Francis Schaeffer, Chuck Colson, and so many I could name have documented, a belief in God and the Bible.
Let me just real quickly posit, you're going to be shocked at this. I think Ms. Cohen is right. And let me tell you why.
Okay.
She is.
This is your last day at AFR. Go ahead. Say whatever you want.
She is incredibly arrogant in saying that the liberal perspective on life, pro-LGBT, pro-abortion, all of the liberal talking points, she is assuming that that is the best way of life for everybody and that is right and that everybody who believes differently is wrong. And in that case, she's right. Believers would make terrible people to get you to a secular worldview.
Okay, so you're saying she's right that if her assumptions were correct,
well,
believers would be bad citizens.
She's right in that she's so arrogant to say that her liberal worldview, every liberal talking point is truth. And therefore, Christians will not get you to that truth. Well, she's right. We won't. We're not going to get you to a pro-LGBT, pro-abortion place. Right. She thinks that's true, and we're all backwards. But she's just being arrogant. And, Alex, she's going to find out one day before the throne that maybe she should have reconsidered some stuff.
Well, the globalists, the secularists, and it's interesting. I mean, they have their summum bonum. They have their God, and it's this global utopia that they think they're going to build, which they're really building a police state. They're building, unless God intervenes and the church is used by the Lord to spread truth, what the globalists, like this individual, are actually building piecemeal is a worldwide police state with freedom for none but a small group of elites. This global gulag. But what she doesn't realize is that her worldview is not the path to liberation. Her worldview is the path to bondage. And as you alluded to, Steve, ultimately eternal condemnation, separation from God. It's funny. The question is not, do people have a God? The question is, do they know the true and living Savior? And sadly, if your God is not the biblical God, the Lord Jesus Christ, your God will become some Tower of Babel of your own making, statism, socialist utopianism, narcissism, which, for the narcissist, and I think we've all seen it, and I've counseled hundreds of people, hell begins here on earth for the narcissist. There are few people as miserable as those that live only for themselves. But we need a revival, folks, and the good news is every one of us can play a role in that.
Well, Alex, since we are coming up here towards the end of this segment, just share with us just briefly what you see as you go to high schools, as you go to college campuses. Do you see a hunger among at least some of the young people to know more about the living Savior you're talking about?
Yeah, I see a hunger among 99.9% of all middle school, high school, college, young adults. They come out in droves, whether I'm on the road speaking or we're leading our camps or, I organize a lot of events with people like myself and Frank Turek and others. And I'm telling you, folks, be encouraged. Be encouraged. The gospel of Jesus, the evidence for a biblical worldview. And by the way, I got to throw this little thing out. The atheists, they believe in evolution, even though we've never seen a gene mutation add additional information to the genome. They say we believe by faith. No, evolution, there is no evidence for Darwinian evolution and this secular world without morality. So young people are hungry. I want to encourage churches to incorporate apologetics and biblical worldview into their Sunday school curriculum. Mm-hmm. But adults, make a friend of a young person, and even if it means just being a listener, because they're eager for truth and they will receive it. We see that every single day.
Dr. Alex McFarland has been our guest this segment. We were just going to talk for 10 minutes with Alex, but
never can talk for just 10 minutes with Alex.
That was some great stuff covering the new atheists. This woman we were talking about, Ms. Cohen, is one of those new atheists who are evangelists for unbelief. So that was profitable. Alex, thank you so much. What do you got planned? You and Bert Harper, Pastor Bert Harper, have any plans? What are you doing on Exploring the Word this afternoon? Okay, I guess we must have lost
Tune in
Alex
later to find out the answer.
That's right. Alex, I was going to give you a chance to promote wherever you're going to be, if you're going to be on the road, but we'll maybe find a different way to do that. All right, folks, we are going to take a 5-minute break for news. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman today. And when we come back after that 5-minute break, it'll be myself, Chris Woodward, and Steve Jordahl. We'll be talking about more of what has been happening, both here and abroad. Mostly here, because we can't hardly get off the topic of what's happening in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere. All right, folks, 5-minute break for news. You're listening to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. We'll be right back.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
How beautiful is the laugh of a baby. Some only believe that life begins when the baby is born, but that's just not so. Psalm 139:13 tells us that God knits us together in the womb at conception. The heartbeat begins in the womb, and the unborn baby is able to respond to sounds and touch. That's why it's our duty and privilege to fight for the sanctity of life. Thank you for joining that fight from AFA.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. 8 Republicans and 208 Democrats voted to oust California GOP Congressman Kevin McCarthy as House Speaker yesterday. New York Republican and Congresswoman Claudia Tenney was one of the House GOP lawmakers who supported McCarthy, and she criticizes the lawmakers who voted to oust the former House Speaker and put the chamber at a standstill.
We're doing nothing. We are not going to the House floor today. And all of them have these grievances that should have been left at the door. You have to vote for our country right now. Yeah. The Democrats are gleeful.
Former South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy says McCarthy was ousted because some Republicans, like Nancy Mace of South Carolina, had a personal beef.
I mean, I could have told you last November that Kevin would have been better off losing, having a slight loss than a slight win, because now he's at the whim and caprice, or was, of the 8 craziest people in the conference. I mean, Ainsley, you mentioned the Congresswoman from South Carolina. She's mad at Kevin because he wouldn't put abortion rights and gun control on the House floor. So imagine if he did. Then he'd have 30 people upset with him. The guy from Virginia talks about the Hastert rule, that you have to have a majority of the majority. And yet he votes with 7 other people. There were only 8 Republicans. 8 sided with the Democrats.
Colorado Congressman Ken Buck was among the 8 Republicans to vote in favor of ousting McCarthy.
This is a situation where there were 8 Republicans who were fed up. There were dozens more who would have voted for this, but didn't need to. They didn't need to stick their necks out. They didn't need to make everybody in this town mad.
Former President Donald Trump is back in court in New York today as he faces allegations of business fraud. New York Attorney General Letitia James accuses the former president of defrauding financial institutions and investors about his net worth to get better loans and business deals. But former President Trump claims the case is an effort to make him look bad in presidential polls.
I'm leading Joe Biden by a lot, which is probably why this is all happening. Not probably, it's definitely. They're coordinating with Washington, 100%.
The Biden administration continues to court younger voters by once again telling those who took out student loans that they don't have to pay them back. Edward Lawrence has more.
The White House, in releasing this, trying to reach those younger voters, which the president's not connecting to, according to polls. $9 billion has now been announced to be forgiven under student debt changes that have already been made to those plans, now making the total forgiveness at $127 billion. That sounds like a big number, but it's only 1.6% of the $1.75 trillion in total outstanding student loan debt. Is an extremely small part. Now, a lawyer suing over student loan forgiveness plans says the president cannot appropriate this money with the stroke of a pen.
Nebraska is making sure gender-confused children don't become political and social pawns. Charlie Butts has been following the story.
Fulfilling terms of the Let Them Grow Act signed into law by Governor Jim Pillen, the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services has adopted emergency regulations for treating transgender kids. They have to undergo psychological evaluation and counseling. Nate Gross of Nebraska Family Alliance tells AFN they also have a 7-day waiting period.
Before this went into effect, there was no regulation at all, and young children could be put on these harmful drugs after one appointment, and we want to make sure that children are getting the help that they need rather than harmful drugs and surgeries with lifelong irreversible consequences.
There are other life-altering decisions children cannot make on their own that have less harmful consequences.
A child is not old enough to get a tattoo or to buy cough syrup over the counter. Why would we permit dangerous hormones and drastic surgeries for them? We believe that children should be receiving help and not harm, treatment, not transition, and protection, not politics.
As added assurance, the law requires practitioners to complete a 3-hour competency education training. I'm Charlie Butts.
Wall Street is holding steady in mixed trading after reports suggested the U.S. economy may be cooling. More news online at AFN and on the AFN mobile app. I'm Rusty Keith.
What does the American Family Association stand for?
AFA upholds the truth that all human beings, including the unborn, are created in the image of God and are worthy of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
These values and more are part of our mission to inform, equip, and activate individuals to strengthen the moral foundations of our culture. We also support the church. We want to be a leading organization in biblical worldview training for cultural transformation. Thank you for standing with us.
Today's Issues continues on AFR with your host, Ed Vitagliano.
And welcome back, folks. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman today. I'm joined in studio by both Chris Woodward and Steve Jordahl. Great time hearing Dr. Alex McFarland in the last segment. I do want to kind of update our listeners. We talked in the first segment, pretty much the entire first segment, about the ouster of Kevin McCarthy as House Speaker. I did want to note that Fox News is reporting that Jim Jordan has announced his bid for the Speaker position, the Republican from Ohio. So we'll have to, we will continue to follow that. That is a big story for conservatives, what happens in the House. So we will continue to update people. But now Jim Jordan, House Judiciary Chairman, the Republican from Ohio, announced that he is running for that Speaker position. So we will see how that plays out. All right, Steve.
Yes, sir.
We're going to go to you because former President Donald Trump is in day 3 of the fraud trial in Manhattan. This is the prosecution from the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, I think. Is that her name?
Yes.
Okay. And there's been, and we've talked about this week, controversy over the presiding judge, Arthur Engoron. I made the comment that it's a perfect villain name. Sounds like the brother of Sauron in The Lord of the Rings. I got a lot of laughs on that comment. Unfortunately, none were from people in studio. But I could sense that out in the listening audience, people were doubled over that comment. But what's the latest?
Well, let me play Tim Wildman here, if I may. You're fired. No. Yes. Donald Trump is in court, and the charges are that he exerted fraud. This is in New York City by overestimating his worth when he's taking bank loans out. He denies it, of course, but he's in his third day of a $250 million civil suit, so this won't land him in jail, but it could cost him a lot of money. As you say, the judge there is Judge Arthur Engoron. And this happened today. They were cross-examining a witness, and the witness, they were trying to attack his credibility. Engoron stepped in the middle of the cross-examination to remind Trump and his attorneys, there's no jury here. You don't have to play to a jury. What he's really saying is, I have made up my mind. Folks, I guarantee that Trump will be convicted of these charges, whether or not he's guilty. He will be convicted.
The fix is in.
The fix is in. I want you to hear the judge. Now, the judge here, Engoron, is talking about his authority to overrule a jury, should the jury find something.
Now, this is not a jury trial.
This is not a jury trial, but this does show his state of mind. And listen to the very last thing he has to say. Listen to Cut 8.
Juries get it wrong a lot. That's my own opinion. I've had situations where, like, oh my heaven's sake, how could they have thought that? Well, I have a tool that I can deal with that. It's called judgment notwithstanding the verdict. I can say there is no possible way that a reasonable jury would have reached that conclusion. I'm following law, I'm an impartial referee, but it's hard to factor out my own emotions.
His own emotions. He can't factor them out, and his own emotions are orange man bad.
Yeah. Now, we talked about this in our story meeting this morning. The Judge Engoron is technically correct that in very rare cases, a judge does have the authority to set aside a jury's verdict. That, as far as I know, happens rarely because it is such a radical step. Your point was this gives us insight into Judge Engoron's attitude of self-importance and his belief that his judgment really never fails. I mean, that's kind of what I heard, that he is always impartial. He knows the law, and so his view is always right.
Except he said that I'm always impartial, but it's hard for me to get past my impartiality.
Yes.
Yeah, he was the guy that was mugging for the camera the other day when the trial first started, and they panned the camera up to him. He literally mugged. He smiled and gave this silly look. He is having a ball.
Yeah.
He and Letitia James are cackling with glee, Kamala Harris-type cackle, because they know that they're going to get Trump. It's all about get Trump. It has nothing to do with guilt or innocence. My opinion.
Yeah. Chris, this I think has been very frustrating for the former president. He, Judge Engoron, has issued a gag order. Now, I will fault the former president for he did post something about the judge's clerk was a clerk, and she was in the courtroom.
Right.
I didn't think the president should have done that. He basically said that she was Chuck Schumer's girlfriend, and so I didn't think that was necessary or the right thing to do from the former president. And as a result of that, Judge Engoron did issue a limited gag order, banning the president from posting anything else about anyone in the courtroom on his staff. Is that right? Do I have that right?
And I've shared the link to that. It's a Politico article, but Fox has done this. I'm sure New York Post probably has something as well, maybe Newsmax. We'll see whether or not Trump follows through with this gag order. He does seem to follow his own rules. But I would think probably his attorneys will advise him to keep his mouth shut and stay away from.
And it is a limited gag order. He still can go out and has. This is how we have gotten some audio from the former president.
Correct.
Going into court or coming out of court. He's going to tell people what he believes. We didn't talk about this in the story meeting, but so you may not have the answer to this question, Chris. But as far as you have been listening to the experts, what's the general consensus on how this, setting aside what Steve has brought up, which I think is pretty clear that Judge Engoron appears to be an anti-Trump judge. I don't expect that to change. Okay, what are some of the other experts saying in terms of just the facts that are put forth in this civil trial?
I can't necessarily point you to one or two specific people that we might recognize from appearing on Fox or Newsmax or something of that sort, but I can tell you the general reaction from people on things like Twitter or X, certainly Truth Social, is that this latest case just appears to be another witch hunt out to get Trump based on the very public statements that Letitia James and other people have made about Trump for a long time now. Keep in mind, too, that this is like the umpteenth case against Trump for whatever it may be. So I think every time somebody throws out another accusation or an indictment out there, it adds to what the court of public opinion has already ruled is an effort to get Trump and to prevent him from being able to run in 2024.
Adds to his poll numbers, too.
Yes.
It does. Nothing has hurt him thus far. Oftentimes, an indictment actually helps his numbers go up.
That's among the Republican base.
Yes.
I haven't seen any polls showing a demonstrable difference one way or the other amongst independents, for example, but maybe that's out there.
I'll look it up on
Well, we're still a ways away from, it's just October. It's October 4th today. We have January is the first of the primary competitions for the nominations for both Republicans and Democrats. They do have a slightly different order in the way those things are going to be carried out. But January, that's what we're talking about. So we have three months or so.
I mean, if you were to look at Real Clear Politics and their compilation polls on the 2024 Republican presidential nomination, Trump is anywhere from 35 to as much as 52 points up on his Republican challengers.
Yeah, and that doesn't seem like that's going to change anytime.
And we're just in the first quarter. So at this point, they have their subs in.
Yes.
The second string.
Second string is in. All right, who's got the next story?
Guess who's back in court? Jack Phillips, the Colorado cake artist, is going to be before the Colorado Supreme Court because he refused to make a gender reveal. Transgender, a man who calls himself Autumn, contractor to try to get him to make a pink cake with a blue frosting to celebrate his gender transition. He refused, as you might imagine, and he was sued again.
In fact, this trans individual, I think, went into his cake shop the day of or the day after the Supreme Court ruled.
The day,
clearly a setup.
The day of, and it's a lawyer. He's a lawyer.
Scardina is the last name.
Yeah. So he's going to be – this just never ends for this guy. This poor –
How long has this been going on for him? Is it 10 years?
Yeah.
His attorney, Jake Warner, yesterday told me 10 years.
Yeah.
So he's been fighting this. We mentioned, I was just joking in our story meeting, that Jack Phillips, this is his second career. And he apparently made the decision somewhere along the line, I'm going to have my business, going to have my family, my church, and do whatever else I was going to do. But I am adding this as a career.
Yes.
I'm going to fight in Colorado to protect religious liberty because a decade-long battle and with no real signs of letting up.
Yeah, and for people that are not aware of the story, I think Steve has shared this before on this here program on AFR. But Steve is actually Steve played a role in helping Jack lawyer up on the initial same-sex marriage case that went to the Supreme Court. And mind you, the Supreme Court never settled the case over the cake. They just said Colorado was mean to Jack, and therefore they ruled in his favor. I'm paraphrasing everything down. But Steve actually was the one who interviewed Jack early on prior to your time here at AFN, right?
I was working at Family News and Focus at Focus on the Family, and 10 years ago or so, I got a call from somebody who said they're protesting outside of a Christian bakery.
Yeah.
And so I went and interviewed Jack and did an article about it. And while he was telling me about this, it occurred to me, I said, do you have representation? He said, nope. I said, well, let me make a call. And I called Kristen, who's the ADF now? Kristen, anyway.
Yeah, Wagoner.
I called her and set up a meeting, and the three of us sat down about a week later, and then they went from there. And sometimes what he's gone through, I feel a little guilty. I've started this whole
You
thing for
did
him.
this!
But, yeah, that was my little brief part in history. Man, this guy is a hero. He just will not give up.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of strength of character and will that he has demonstrated in this. So what is this latest part of this battle that he's fighting? He's now going back to the Colorado Supreme Court. Is that right?
That's correct. The lower courts, Colorado is case is stacked. They have draconian, very stringent, what they call non-discrimination laws, pro-LGBT laws. Yeah. Despite the fact that there are any number of bakeries, people that can make wedding cakes or transgender cakes in Denver, he has to make it. They're forcing him
to say no.
They're forcing him. They want to force him to say, okay, gay. You know, someone came to wanted him to make a cake of a Satan smoking a marijuana cigarette.
And that was the same person that wants him to make the transgender reveal cake, according to his attorneys at 80.
They're out to get him.
Yeah. All right. Well, folks, pray for Jack Phillips. Pray for a good decision in Colorado, because this is not just going to affect him. It's going to affect all the Christians, at least those who own businesses. And I should say at least those who own businesses where there's some artistic input that is required. Obviously, if people are making Chick-fil-A sandwiches. I've never heard of a Christian saying, "Nah, I'm going to check." Tim always says, "We're not going to check your sexual orientation credentials at the door," and say, "Well, if you're gay, we're not going to serve you waffle fries."
Jack has been very clear. He's more than willing to sell anybody a cake that is already made.
Yeah.
That was made known in the Supreme Court thing. The thing about Jack Phillips, the media always makes it out as if he's the only baker in a state of 5.8 million people making things in Colorado.
Right. All right. So pray for Jack Phillips and pray for that case, folks, because it is still ongoing.
All right. Let's talk about what's going on in Ohio. Ohio is doing a constitutional convention of sorts. They're voting on a new constitution, and they want to enshrine abortion as a right in this constitution. So as they are voting on this, 100 bipartisan Democrat and Republican black pastors in Ohio have signed a letter saying, "Don't. Abortion does not belong in the Constitution." Pro-life black pastors, Democrats, Republicans speaking out for life in Ohio.
And that is, it's up in the air. Now, Ohio is usually a very pro-life state. It is a red state, but there is some question because of all the outside money that's pouring into that, all the pro-abortion money. There is some question about whether or not that vote will go against the unborn. I haven't seen any recent polls, but I've heard kind of the anecdotal evidence about how up in the air that is. Is that what you guys have heard in terms of
the
what's
cities
happening?
there in Ohio tend to be the ones driving them to the left. Cleveland, Columbus, even Cincinnati has a very liberal bend to it on a lot of issues, including life, whereas the rest of the state is bright red on these issues.
So this is a good thing. A bipartisan group of 100 black pastors speaking out on this issue. I hope they are able to convince a lot of people to go to the polls and vote pro-life. All right, let's go from Ohio to Wisconsin.
Yes, Wisconsin, where I had some really good pizza one time in Kenosha, which is not far from where my mom grew up.
Wait. Pizza in Wisconsin's
Oh,
good?
yeah. I don't know
They
if
got
it's
good cheese.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. Anyway, back to the story of which I distracted us from. Yesterday, there was a really big ruling from the Waukesha County Circuit Court there, a state court in Wisconsin. This is a long-running case brought by Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty and Alliance Defending Freedom. They took Kettle Moraine School District to court because the school district, according to Will and ADF, violated parents' constitutional rights to raise their own children by allowing minor students to change gender identity at school without parental consent and even over their objection. And the update on this case is, thanks to the lawsuit brought by Will and Alliance Defending Freedom, a court ruled that the school district was in violation. I'm going to be talking with the attorney at Will later today. They're saying that they can take this to other courts around the country because a lot of school districts have been doing what Kettle Moraine School District was doing and was found in violation of.
Now, what does Will stand for again? Wisconsin what?
Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty.
Okay. So this is a tremendous victory. It is Wisconsin, but as you pointed out, Chris, this is something that certainly parents who want to maintain control of what happens to their children when they're in school, this is something maybe they can replicate in other school districts, and hopefully it will survive legal challenges because these kinds of things will be challenged.
Yes. A lot of people think, they still have say over their kids, but a number of school systems have said, hey, once your kid's on the schoolhouse grounds, we control them.
The President of the United States has said that.
Your kids are our kids.
And Education Secretary Cardona has said that. And the teachers' unions in a lot of states have said the same thing. The kids belong to us. Secretary Cardona said that he gets tired of parents thinking they know what's best for their kids.
Right.
That's what he said.
Every time Joe Biden says your kids are our kids, I don't claim Hunter. He's not my child.
You certainly don't want to have to pay for his legal troubles.
No.
By the way, how much time do you need for your final story,
I think
Steve?
give me 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Yeah.
Well, then let's go ahead and go with that.
Because I want to make Chris happy. He's a good friend of mine and everything.
Yeah.
Chris is a Miami Dolphins fan, as you may or may not know.
I know that.
And his team, they took a pretty tough loss against Buffalo last Sunday. Their quarterback is Tua Tagovailoa. And did I do that right, Chris?
You got close. Tagovailoa.
Tagovailoa? He was an Alabama guy, so roll tide. Hi, Heather.
Dump
man.
that.
Yeah. We have a 7-second delay.
Yeah.
He was at a press conference after the loss, and he was asked by somebody, how does his faith help support him in the middle of this loss? I want you to hear what he had to say. Cut 11.
The best thing about being a believer of Jesus Christ to me is that good Lord up above doesn't care whether you win a game, whether you lose a game. Allowing me this platform, is to me is the best thing in the world, to be able to profess my faith, something that I firmly believe in, something that's been foundationally instilled in me at a young age. And when I'm out there, like I even pray before I go out to series and whatnot. Like I'm always praying, like I'm on the sideline, looks like I'm talking to myself. Having to remember scripture always keeps me encouraged in continuing to press forward, especially in times like this.
Nice.
It is refreshing to hear anyone testifying. This is I have two things I wanted to say about this. First of all, it is a breath of fresh air because we do get, especially here, we do get a steady stream of negative and anti-God sentiments that we have to do our jobs.
Washington Post to it.
Yes, that's right. The second thing I will say is I can remember, Steve, how old are you?
Old enough to remember.
Okay, all right.
63.
All right, so we're in the same ballpark. I'm 65. But I can remember growing up loving football, loving all the sports, and having the time to watch all these sports. I was not a Christian growing up. I didn't become a Christian until I was almost 20 years old. Okay, I never remember a single, maybe with the exception of Bobby Richardson. All right, but other than that, and that might have been after I became a Christian, I don't ever remember an athlete talking about their faith. There might have been Christians.
There was that
sports,
John
sure
3:16 sign up in the stands.
No, I didn't remember seeing that until after I became a Christian. I don't know when that started. But here's my point. It was only when our country started turning more secular that I began to see, or that our country began starting to kind of fall apart, that I began to hear and see Christian athletes talking about their faith. And this goes back to what Alex McFarland was saying. We do seem to be the church seems to be being forced to be more bold about their faith. I mean, now Chris, you don't probably remember a time when athletes didn't talk about their faith, right? I mean, you're a younger guy. You're in your 30s.
The first time I remember seeing the John 3:16 sign was I was watching a Bulls game on WGN, because back in the day, kids, we had this thing called cable. You didn't stream stuff over the internet. And thanks to WGN, we were exposed to things like Bulls games, Cubs games. The Braves were on WTBS back in the day.
That's right.
5 minutes after the top of the hour. That was the first time I remember seeing that. What strikes me about the Tua story is oftentimes with NFL stories, we talk about the negatives.
Yeah.
The guys who were in the news for doing bad things. Tua here is doing the right thing, but that doesn't mean everybody in the league is doing what they should, and therefore you should just fall hook, line, and sinker. Pay real close attention to what they're saying. And in Tua's case, he actually mentions Jesus Christ. I appreciate that about him. A lot of times people talk about, give thanks to God, and that's okay. But Jesus Christ is the next level. So kudos to Tua.
Sure is. All right, Tua, whatever his name is.
Yes.
Okay. Hey, folks, you've been listening to today's issues, and we are so glad you joined us. Lord willing, we will be back tomorrow. And guess what? There is more great programming directly ahead on American Family Radio. Hope you tune in. Check out the podcasts. Go to afr.net. There's a podcast drop-down menu. you can check out the shows that you may have missed. Bye for now.
In this new world, on this new day, we rejoice that Roe v. Wade has been overturned. Preborn has